Hey Deckers, Like a Dragon Ishin is here, and it definitely warrants its verified status. This is running fantastically on the Steam Deck, and it's an awesome game as well. Although there is some weird things going on with the cutscenes, as some of them seem to be capped at 30 frames per second. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning is for this, but it's not all of the cutscenes either. Even the mini kind of FMVs are also 60 frames per second, but some of the main cutscenes where you're not participating in the dialogue are capped at 30 frames per second, whereas a lot of the other cutscenes that you are participating or skipping the dialogue are at 60 frames per second. So I'm not quite sure the reasoning of this, but it does make for a bit of a strange experience dropping to 30 frames per second for some of those cutscenes a lot of the time. Now, the introduction of the Brawler, Swordsman, Gunman and Wild Dancer skill sets makes for a lot of fun battles, and if you're a fan of the Accuser series, then you'll have to let us know whether you are for or against the real-time combat coming back, but I'm actually really enjoying the real-time combat in this. So the first settings we're going to look at is the quality FSR 2.1 enabled with the medium preset at 60 frames per second with VSync on. Most of the time this is running very smoothly, although we do get big dips down into even the 30s during some of the battles, but also in some of the transition and loading sequences as well. You saw there it dropped below 40 frames per second. It does feel very fluid in a lot of the battles, and one of my annoyances with the real-time mode is actually that there is kind of no lock-on, it seems, or it's a very tentative one. So if you're trying to do big combos, a lot of the time you end up facing the wrong way, especially if you're using a gun to shoot, and just end up firing off in completely the wrong direction. I am absolutely loving the Wild Dancer though, and I'll definitely be leveling this one up to the max. The great thing with the skill sets is you can swap around skill orbs that are generic between each of the modes, so you can really boost one of the other modes quite quickly. As you can see here, during one of the kind of fatalities, that frames per second again drops down into the 30s, so it's not very stable on the medium settings, even with FSR 2.1 enabled in a lot of these battle sections. So next we're going to look at capping that at 30 frames per second, and you can actually push this up to the high preset quite happily because it doesn't really waver. Although what I did notice is not much really between the medium and high settings. It's very difficult to tell what actually changed. We have a few extra graphics effects, but considering we've now dropped to 30 and upped that graphic fidelity, I didn't see a huge difference. But what I did notice is that 30 frames per second cap. It does not feel very fluid on the Steam Deck, and this may be just because I came from one of the higher presets originally, but it really doesn't feel very smooth. If you're used to 30 frames per second though, you're going to have an absolute whale of a time with this, and it will be consistent all of the way through because even those drop down in the cutscenes will be at that 30 level. So my time at 30 was fairly brief because I just didn't really like the feel of it, even with those higher graphics presets. So obviously after trying 30, I put it back down to medium and turned FSR off and went for my favorite 40 Hz cap on the Steam Deck, keeping that VSync on in game. And to be honest, this does feel a lot better. We do still get a very occasional dips in some of the loading sections and in some of the finisher fatality moves, but for the most part it is extremely smooth. And just look at that frame time at the top of the screen here, it is perfectly flat most of the time until we hit some of those finisher sequences, and again it goes into around that 30 FPS range, but it is minimal time. Wattage wise, you are going to be getting around 2 to 3 hours battery depending on what you're doing, and I was trying to do a nice counter here to show off, but the guy just didn't want to hit me, which is typical of trying to do a demo. Favourite mode is definitely Wild Dancer. The Gunman does feel a little bit overpowered because you can just stand back and shoot everybody before they even get anywhere close, but some of the enemies do deflect bullets and are a bit bullet spongy, so you do need to get in for those melee attacks. Again, if you're a fan of the Accuser series, you have a lot of the side quests where you have to go and eat and do little random missions, and I've really been enjoying my time with this one, even though I've not played a lot of the Accuser games. The last one I played was Accuser Like a Dragon, and this feels like a great follow-on from that game. Let us know in the comments below if you're going to be picking this one up. If you pick up the deluxe, you should be able to dive in right now, but I believe the main game is still locked until the 21st of February. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.